hopes of obtaining the empire, with the prospect of which he had long before flattered himself, from the following omens. Upon an estate belonging to the Flavian family, in the neighbourhood of Rome, there was an old oak, sacred to Mars, which, at the several deliveries of Vespasia, put out each time a new branch, evident imitations of the future fortune of each child. The first was but a slender one, which quickly withered away, and accordingly the girl that was born did not live long. The second became vigorous, which portended great good fortune. But the third grew like a tree. His father, Sabinus, encouraged by these omens, which were confirmed by the augurs, told his mother that her grandson would be the emperor of Rome, at which she laughed heartily, wondering, she said, that her son should be in his dotage, whilst she continued still in full possession of her faculties. Afterwards, in his aedileship, when Caius Caesar, being enraged at his not taking care to have the streets kept clean, ordered the soldiers to fill the bosom of his gown with dirt, some persons at that time construed it into a sign that the government, being trampled under foot and deserted in some civil commotion, would fall under his protection, and as it were into his lap. Once, while he was at dinner, a strange dog, that wandered about the streets, brought a man's hand, and laid it under the table. And another time, while he was at supper, a plough ox, throwing the yoke off his neck, broke into the room, and after he had frightened away all the attendants, on a sudden, as if he was tired, fell down at his feet, as he lay still upon his couch, and hung down his neck. A cypress tree, likewise, in a field belonging to the family, was torn up by the roots, and laid flat upon the ground, when there was no violent wind. But next day it rose again fresher and stronger than before. He dreamt in Achaia that the good fortune of himself and his family would begin when Nero had a tooth drawn, and it happened that the day after, a surgeon coming into the hall showed him a tooth which he had just extracted from Nero. In Judea, upon his consulting the oracle of the divinity at Carmel, the answer was so encouraging as to assure him of success in anything he projected, however great or important it might be. And when Josephus, one of the noble prisoners, was put in chains, he confidently affirmed that he should be released in a very short time by the same Vespasian, but he would be emperor first. Some omens were likewise mentioned in the news from Rome, and among others, that Nero, towards the close of his days, was commanded in a dream to carry Jupiter's sacred chariot out of the sanctuary where it stood to Vespasian's house, and conduct it thence into the circus. Also, not long afterwards, as Galba was going to the election, in which he was created consul for the second time, a statue of the divine Julius turned towards the east, and in the field of Bedriacum, before the battle began, 2 eagles engaged in the sight of the army, and one of them being beaten, a third came from the east, and drove away the conqueror. He made, however, no attempt upon the sovereignty, though his friends were very ready to support him, and even pressed him to the enterprise, until he was encouraged to it by the fortuitous aid of persons unknown to him and at a distance. 2,000 men, drawn out of the 3 legions in the Moesian army, had been sent to the assistance of Otho. While they were upon their march, news came that he had been defeated, and had put an end to his life. Notwithstanding which, they continued their march as far as Aquileia, pretending that they gave no credit to the report. There, tempted by the opportunity which the disorder of the times afforded them, they ravaged and plundered the country at discretion, until at length, fearing to be called to an account on their return, and punished for it, they resolved upon choosing and creating an emperor. For they were no ways inferior, they said, to the army which made Galba emperor, nor to the Praetorian troops which had set up Otho, nor the army in Germany to whom Vitellius owed his elevation. The names of all the consular lieutenants, therefore, being taken into consideration, and one objecting to one, and another to another for various reasons, at last some of the 3rd legion, which a little before Nero's death had been removed out of Syria into Moesia, extolled Vespasian in high terms, and all the rest assenting, his name was immediately inscribed on their standards. The design was nevertheless quashed for a time, the troops being brought to submit to Vitellius a little longer. However, the fact becoming known, Tiberius Alexander, governor of Egypt, first obliged the legions under his command to swear obedience to Vespasian as their emperor on the calends, the 1st of July, which was observed ever after as the day of his accession to the empire, and upon the 5th of the Ides of the same month, the army in Judea, where he then was, also swore allegiance to him. What contributed greatly to forward the affair was a copy of a letter, whether real or counterfeit, which was circulated, and said to have been written by Otho before his decease to Vespasian, recommending to him in the most urgent terms to avenge his death, and entreating him to come to the aid of the Commonwealth, as well as a report which was circulated, that Vitellius, after his success against Otho, proposed to change the winter quarters of the legions, and remove those in Germany to a less hazardous station and a warmer climate. Moreover, amongst the governors of provinces, Licinius Mucianus, dropping the grudge arising from the jealousy of which he had hitherto made no secret, promised to join him with the Syrian army, and among the allied kings, Volugesus, king of the Parthians, offered him a reinforcement of 40,000 archers. Having therefore entered on a civil war, and sent forward his generals and forces into Italy, he himself in the meantime passed over to Alexandria to obtain possession of the key of Egypt. Here, having entered alone, without attendants, the temple of Serapis, to take the auspices respecting the establishment of his power, and having done his utmost to propitiate the deity, upon turning round, his freedman Basilides appeared before him, and seemed to offer him the sacred leaves, chaplets, and cakes, according to the usage of the place, although no one had admitted him, and he had long laboured under a muscular debility which would hardly have allowed him to walk into the temple, besides which it was certain that at the very time he was far away. Immediately after this arrived letters with intelligence that Vitellius's troops had been defeated at Cremona, and he himself slain at Rome. Vespasian, the new emperor, having been raised unexpectedly from a low estate, wanted something which might clothe him with divine majesty and authority. This likewise was now added. A poor man who was blind, and another who was lame, came both together before him, when he was seated on the tribunal, imploring him to heal them, and saying that they were admonished in a dream by the god Serapis to seek his aid, who assured them that he would restore sight to the one by anointing his eyes with his spittle, and give strength to the leg of the other, if he vouchsafed but to touch it with his heel. At first he could scarcely believe that the thing would anyhow succeed, and therefore hesitated to venture on making the experiment. At length, however, by the advice of his friends, he made the attempt publicly, in the presence of the assembled multitudes, and it was crowned with success in both cases. About the same time, at Tegea in Arcadia, by the direction of some soothsayers, several vessels of ancient workmanship were dug out of a consecrated place, on which there was an effigy resembling Vespasian. End of Vespasian, Part 1.